Welcome to the Historical Interface Museum. You have selected
Britain, 1750 to 1900, expansion, trade, and industry.
all evidence loaded and ready for investigation.
Load the options, Curator.
Certainly.
I'll take City Life.
City life selected.
Question. What were these new industrial cities like?
AT2, cross-check, interpretation.
There's no one view of the past.
Gallery's a bit full, isn't it?
Heaving. So where do you want to start?
I don't know.
Data to Visor.
Where are the fields of yesteryear? Swallowed up, engulfed by a glut of brick and mortar. Where once were hedgerows, stand street upon street. Where once glades of oak, foul factory gates. These are the walking cities. There's no tube, no bus, no cars. You want to work, you've got to live close, jostle for space. Men, women, children, livestock, all hug-a-mug and cozy in these overcrowded urban slums. And don't forget your nose plugs, folks. The stench is awful. And diseases, well, take your pick. There's typhus, TB, smallpox, diphtheria, cholera.
Come on, it can't have been that bad. This is just your view, right?
It's an interpretation, yes, but it's impossible to know exactly what things were really like in the past, so anything anybody says is just their view.
So you might be wrong.
Any normally sensitive person who saw Little Ireland in Manchester, or the East End of Leeds, or the overcrowded cellars in Liverpool was likely to respond with outrage and anger.
Prove it.
Okay, select any of the industrial towns, ask any question you like, and I'll find you the evidence.
You're on.
Map to Visor.
All right. So, how about what it looked like?
Bradford selected.
Every other factory town in England is a paradise in comparison to this hole. The air of Manchester lies like lead upon your head. In Birmingham, it is as if you are sitting with your nose in a stovepipe. In Leeds, you have to cough from the dust and stink, but you can put up with all that. In Bradford, however, you think you are in hell.
All right, that looks bad, but what about the dirt?
Leeds selected.
Acres on acres of little streets, unplanned, no paving stones above, only churned up mud thoroughfares, no sewers beneath, an occasional open space used as a common cess yard, privies often ruinous, all most horribly foul, pigsties empty since their usual inmates have been turned out to prey upon the garbage of the neighborhood.
Dirty enough for you?
They're living like animals.
Select Manchester.
Selected.
A horde of ragged women and children swarm about here, as filthy as the swine that thrive upon the garbage heaps. The race that lives in these ruinous cottages or in dark, wet cellars, in measureless filth and stench, must really have plumbed the depths.
All right, you win. Plenty of evidence to show things were bad.
But we've hardly scraped the surface.
Aberdare selected.
There are whole rows of houses without any lavatories at all. The inmates have nowhere to go. They use the fields or even the streets. And what with that and the filth thrown out of the houses and left in the street, the town stinks. The courts are not fit for human habitation.
I want to see a court.
Load.
All right.
Because they were so narrow, very little sunlight could penetrate. These courts would have been teeming with people, and the houses had no kitchens or toilets, no running water.
How did they cope?
A standpipe supplied the water for the whole court, but this was only on for a few hours a day and was often polluted. There would also have been an open sewer or gutter for rubbish.
Ugh. Bring it to life.
Andrew Mearns, author, The Bitter Cry of Outcast London. Animate.
Inside, you go down rotten staircases, grope your way along dark and filthy passages swarming with vermin. 8 square feet. That's about the average size of many of these rooms. The walls and ceilings are black with filth through years of neglect. A window, half of it stuffed with rags to keep out the rain and the other half so begrimed that light cannot enter. Every room in these rotten and reeking tenements houses a family, often two. In one cellar, I found a mother, a father, 3 children, and 4 pigs. In another, a man ill with smallpox, his wife just recovering from the birth of her 8th child, and the other children running around half naked and covered in dirt.
No one I've heard so far lived in the slums, did they?
No, and that may have affected their interpretations.
Well, I want someone who lived there.
I'm afraid...
And don't give me that rubbish about working class people not reading or writing. There's got to be something.
All right.
Thank you.
This is Alice Foley. She wrote her story later in life, A Bolton Childhood.
My earliest dim memories are of lots of people crowded into our only room. There was a wooden cradle, rocked by a string attached to a person nearest the window. I suppose the baby must have been cuddled against a warm bosom at odd moments, but I don't remember that. What I do remember is how poor mothers daubed their breasts with soot to discourage suckling, and the howl of rage produced at the offer of those coal-black nipples.
How did anyone survive?
Thousands didn't. Diseases thrived in these conditions. The life expectancy for a person from a laboring family in Leeds in 1842 was 19 years.
Why didn't someone do something about it?
No connection had been made between dirt and disease.
So the population went down, right?
Wrong. The death rate was high in the towns, but the birth rate was higher, so the population continued to grow.
Population of London, 1750, 657,000. 1851, 2,491,000. Population of Liverpool, 22,000, 376,000. Glasgow, 23,000, 345,000. Manchester.
Cities can't have been too bad.
Sorry?
Well, people wouldn't have lived there, would they? They'd have moved to the country.
Gallery reform. Country life engaged.
I'll take that one. And a text.
There were trim villages, with a grey church in the middle. There was the pleasant tinkle of the blacksmith's anvil, the basket maker peeling his willow, the wheelwright putting the last touch to a blue cart with red wheels. At the well, clean and comely women carrying yoked buckets. The homesteads were those of rich farmers. Old England was the best of all possible countries, a nation of clean little market towns without factories.
See what I mean? Sounds really lovely.
But that's the view of a novelist.
Doesn't stop her being right, and I bet there's more that backs her up. There you go. That looks nice. And another text.
These villages in the South Downs are beautiful to behold. There is an appearance of comfort about the dwellings of the labourers all along here. The houses are good and warm. The gardens are neat and full of vegetables of the best kinds.
Interpretation, contrast. Painting through.
What's this?
The other side of the story.
Most of the cottages I visited were mud hovels with cesspools or piles of filth close to the doors. They're damp 3 parts of the year, and one had only a single small pane of glass stuck in the mud wall for a window. The people are poor, dirty, in rags, living almost wholly on bread and potatoes.
Why do things always seem so bad?
People tend to describe the very best or the very worst and leave out what's just ordinary.
So were villages better or worse places to live than towns?
Farm workers had low pay and long hours. There was a growing feeling that the towns offered a wider choice of better paid jobs, better housing, more freedom.
Fair enough. Re-engage city life.
Gallery reform. Re-engaged.
Ah, the grandeur of the Victorian city.
What grandeur? All I've seen so far is just slums and filthy conditions.
The evidence examined so far has supported a negative interpretation of city life. You could select the experiences of the rich or middle class. If you had the money for a horse-drawn carriage, you could live in the more comfortable suburbs. Or select a more upbeat interpretation of life in the back streets.
Okay.
Life in the street was interesting. We had a pale, stuttering boy who hawked muffins from door to door, whilst on wintry nights the hot pea man came along, ringing his bell, inviting custom for his green, mushy peas, giving off a savoury smell on the chilly air.
What else was good about a city for someone like her? Where is she from?
Bolton, a very fine town specializing in very fine cotton.
Population, 1850, 60,000. 1870, 104,000. 1890, 149,000.
And growing fast. Half of Bolton's workforce were in the factories, many more in engineering workshops, coal mines, bleaching crafts, forges and foundries.
Move to ground.
Ground probe selected.
The Town Hall, 1873, built in the classical style with sculptures by Calder Marshall. Excuse me.
I want to look round. This is no good. It's all modern.
Look up. The original Victorian building.
So what shops would there have been?
Select an old trade directory. They list what every building was used for.
Mrs. Haddock, milliner. The Mexican Cheroot and Cigar Company. Miss E.J. Evans, flower dealer. Richard Day, hairdresser. S. Cheatham and Son, hosiers and hatters. The Bolton Junior Burns Club. Tate and Son.
This looks old.
Archive match.
Plenty of Victorian Bolton survives. Old Hall Street.
Archive match.
The Town Hall in the distance. Whitaker's department store on the corner there. Knowsley Street.
Archive match.
Victoria Hall, still used for Methodist services. And the 1855 Market Hall.
Select Market Hall.
Remember, this was before refrigeration. People had to shop every day. Halls like this replaced traditional open-air markets.
Would Alice Foley have shopped here?
Almost certainly, but it wasn't the only place available.
It was the heyday of the corner shop. Mother went to a higgledy-piggledy place kept by a friend of hers named Kitty. Neither Mother nor Kitty could read or write, but they had their own symbols for reckoning up the score, which was later chalked on the door. As a small girl, I usually perched on a sack of taters, half-absorbing gossip about bad husbands and hard times.
There were 200 butchers, 170 confectioners, 127 fruiterers and greengrocers, 60 newsagents, 60 bakers, 30 tripe dealers, 313 pubs, 60 primary schools.
I'll take pubs.
The pubs hardly ever closed. They offered interest and action, noise and warmth. There was music and singing, gambling and games.
Sounds like fun.
Many Victorians blamed the pubs for ruined families, neglected wives, hungry children, and debts.
When Father was recovering from a boozing bout, his temper was most vicious and unpredictable. I recall him following Mother out kitchen, whining monotonously. "Lend us a penny, Meg. Give us a penny, I'm choking." At length, in a fit of desperation, a penny would be flung onto the table. Then Mother would snatch up her shawl, vanish into the street, and seek temporary refuge in a neighbour's home.
There were 78 milliners, 101 boot and shoe dealers, 85 cloggers, 35 pawnbrokers.
Pawnbrokers? What's that?
I don't know what we'd have done without 'em. Every week, it seemed, we'd nip in smartly at the side door of the Golden Balls to trade in our Sunday best for a little cash. Then come payday, in again to buy 'em back. The pawn shop was owned by a big jovial man named Bill. He made my mother laugh with his jokes and ready gossip. He was always perched on a high stool behind a long wire-netted counter. As my mother was a regular customer, he never opened her parcel, but placed it in a cubicle above his head, then slipped some silver coins to my mother under the grill.
Why does he seem so cheerful? It must have been terrible to have to sell your clothes.
In the rows of terraced houses, fun started outside your own front door. There were peddlers, singers, rag and bone men with their handcarts festooned with strings of bright balloons. And there was more: cycling, brass bands, pigeon fanciers, canary breeders, whippet racing, cricket, football.
I'll take football.
Bolton Olympic were the first working-class team to win the FA Cup when they beat the Old Etonians. They went on to help found the Professional Football League in 1889.
I bet they didn't have any crowd trouble in those days.
Incorrect. If there was a bad result, the pitch would be bombarded with sticks and orange peel. Officials and players were assaulted as they left the field.
After the affair was over, I was attacked by a mob of infuriated beings in petticoats, supposed to be women, who were, without doubt in some cases, mothers, if I may judge from the innocent-looking babes suckling at their breasts. They brandished their umbrellas and shook their fists in my face.
Loop ended.
What now?
City life. Change vector. Awaiting selection.
The Victorian city gave people a freedom of choice they'd never had before. More jobs, a greater variety of food available, more time for leisure,
Select.
theaters and music halls.
Give me a text then.
Ma was positively overcome by the comedy and laughed till every one of the immense bows on her ample cap trembled. The governess put a handkerchief to her mouth and merely pretended to laugh.
I'll have a reconstruction.
There was a young fella from Leeds who swallowed a packet of seeds. They started to sprout through his nose and his mouth. Now his face is covered in weeds.
What's this then?
Crossness Pumping Station, London.
Sewers were laid for decent drainage. Public baths were built. These were for relaxation, but for hygiene too.
That one.
They weren't just interested in clean and healthy bodies, but healthy minds. They built art galleries, schools, universities, libraries. Like this one. Notice the Gothic style of architecture the Victorians liked so much.
It's like a cathedral.
Talking of which, don't forget all the churches they built. Churches provided a real focus for many people, not just in terms of Christian faith, but for social reasons too. There were church teas, clubs, outings, singing in the choir.
Where's this?
Manchester Town Hall.
Amazing.
The local councillors, the city fathers, wanted to celebrate Manchester's industrial success to show off its prosperity.
It's fantastic.
Caution.
This is one side of city life. Remember the slums? That was the flip side. So what were these new industrial cities like?
All systems disengaging.
There's nothing like a good day out. Except another good day out. And another one. And another one. And another one. And another one. Millions of people visit national parks and tourist resorts. But is it a right that everyone should have? Or does tourism need to be controlled?
The cars that they come in are creating all sorts of problems with pollution, added to pollution blown by the wind from the cities, and it all adds up to a higher level of pollution from traffic fumes than you get in central London. And it will not surprise us if not far into the future we're talking about charging people to come onto some of the roads in the national park.
I think that people do have the right to come out here. They do have that right.
I think people need to be able to get away from cities because city life is very claustrophobic, it's hectic.
You're going to see some of the what, where, when and whys of tourism and the problems it's causing. At the end of the programme, you're going to have to decide where you stand. Should tourists roam free? Or are they harming the places they go to so much that their numbers must be controlled? What exactly is the problem? So many people are visiting places like national parks that they themselves are destroying the calm and the beauty they came to enjoy. The cars they arrive in cause congestion and pollution, and their feet and wheels are literally destroying the place. There are just too many people for the place to cope with. Where's the problem happening? Well, most tourists go to cities, but cities are places designed for huge numbers of people. It's in the countryside that tourism is the biggest problem, especially in small towns and villages in the national parks. Like bees round a honeypot, tourists zoom in. On Bakewell, Aviemore, Keswick, Ambleside, Malham, Robin Hood's Bay, Betsy Coyd, Grassington, Lyndhurst, Aysgarth, Hawes and Pickering. It's in honeypot towns like these the tourists can outnumber the locals and take over the surrounding countryside as well. When did the problem start? In the 1930s, people started to demand the right to have access to the countryside. National parks were set up at the end of the 1940s to give people who lived in cities a chance to enjoy the countryside.
Ever been to Yorkshire, any of you? Mind you, you want a really good car for Yorkshire, because the hills are something terrific. Get a good car. That's the secret of it.
Pressure really began to rise in the 1970s, with more cars around and new motorways bringing people to the parks from further away. By far the worst times are bank holidays and Sundays in spring and summer. That's when the traffic really builds up.
Heavy traffic brought chaos to Bakewell in Derbyshire today as families headed out to the Peak District to enjoy the sunshine. The motoring organisations are warning of congestion on all the major routes in the region as people return home this evening.
Cars have always been associated with freedom and the open road, and the open road leads to the countryside. The problem got bigger as the population of Britain increased. More and more people had cars, and people had more money to spend and more leisure time to spend it in. And nowadays there are new sports like mountain biking or four-wheel driving, which can do damage to the ground and cause erosion. Sales of four-wheel drive vehicles have more than doubled since 1990. Well, if there are too many people wanting to come, have we got to limit the numbers somehow? Or is access to national parks a right no one should have taken away? Charging to get in would cut down numbers. Yeah, but then national parks would be only for the rich and not for the poor. Or we could just stop people coming by car. Make them use public transport. But buses aren't very convenient, especially if you're carrying a hang glider. Cars are the only way for most people to get there. So, is it a free-for-all? Or have there got to be limits? The two films you are going to see were both shot in the Peak District National Park. The first film argues that people from towns have a right to get out into a national park and use it, as long as they are responsible about it.
I'm from Manchester, just outside Manchester, and it's just a total contrast coming out here into the countryside. It's quiet, you can get out on your own, and it's just so much more beautiful. I think people need to be able to get away from cities because city life is very claustrophobic, it's hectic. People need time to just appreciate the countryside and to see what's out here. And if they don't get out here, they're never going to appreciate it. They're never going to have an idea of how to conserve these places that are very special. Well, mountain biking obviously is going to do some damage, but so is walking, so are farm vehicles, so are quarry trucks. And really, the solution is not, I don't feel, to ban everybody from going to these places. Everybody's just got to consider each other and the land.
There's a small problem in the peak of actually chipping holds, which is mainly a problem to do with the rock climbers as opposed to anything else, but climbers are pretty conscientious as far as looking after their environment. Everybody accepts that Stanwich is a busy area, and the peak is very busy all over when the weather's good on bank holidays, because it's accessible from London and from like all over.
One of the things I have noticed here is that there is public transport here, but for us to get here by public transport really wouldn't be feasible at all. You'd have multiple changes of transport and it would take forever.
It's not very good public transport. Not public transport. Buses like every week.
It takes us an hour and a half to get here from where we live anyway.
And we have to get up pretty early in the morning anyway, so they wouldn't usually start early.
Yeah.
Mid-afternoon you finish.
It's just, it'd be impractical to come up on a bus anyway.
This site belongs to the Peak Park Planning Board, and they give the club, the Derbyshire Soaring Club, permission to fly here. And consequently, you can see we're rigging up on an area of grass and stuff, and we, for our part, keep off the moorlands and the stuff like that. So we just do our bit to conserve what we can and still get our enjoyment out of the park, you know. That's really the plan, and that's much the same scheme everywhere. We have some sites from the National Trust, and hopefully, you know, we can work in. We've done pretty well. We've been here 15 years, so we obviously haven't destroyed too much stuff. What happens here on the Peak Park is that it gets very dry, right? And any disturbance when it's really dry kills it. So we come along and fly, and we don't realise, you know, what's happening to the grass and stuff, and it gets knackered. And then we kind of, once it's sort of going like this, you can see, what we do is we just keep off it onto the bits that are okay. Right. And it regenerates and seems to be all right, seems to be coping with us all right. The really, really big things I've got from hang gliding, which I didn't realise I'd get, I always wanted to fly. When you fly over sort of, I don't know, Lady Bower and you know, you see the views and the typography and stuff, it's amazing. When you get up, we've been up 6,500 feet up here, and you can see Manchester, Sheffield, you can see the whole of the Kinder. It's an amazing sort of experience and sight.
This series of caves was formed about 111,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age by huge underground rivers of glacial meltwater. Now, who knows what a glacier is? Yes.
City School's been using Castleton as a fieldwork centre for 3 years. We come once a year for 2 days in the summer. It's very important that we come out into the field. We could do this exercise totally in the classroom, but that would not let some of our children see anything in the way of fieldwork experience. For many of these children, they've never been anywhere, even though this is very close to Sheffield. They've not been out here before, and it's very important that they experience what it's like. In the same way, I feel that they are getting an awareness that they'll be able to bring with them, hopefully, when they visit with friends or relatives in the future.
It's just a total contrast coming out here into the countryside. It's quiet, you can get out on your own, and it's just so much more beautiful.
If you've never tried it, get yourself a mountain bike and get on some tracks. It's great fun.
It's your body against your bike, against your mind and everything. You know, when you feel like packing in, just dig in a bit further. Because you know, every time you get to the top, there's a lovely downhill.
The second film argues that even if tourists are acting responsibly, the combined effect of them all is killing the countryside.
Well, I can't help but feel that the